The reason why you can't enter a flow state is nothing to do with caffeine or the Pomodoro, and it's just one small tweak that nobody talks about that you can make right now that allowed my client Martin to start getting into a flow state for 7 hours every single day, make 2.5k in his business in literally just under a month. So if you effortlessly want to get into flow states for 6+ hours in a day on your business and actually start to make more money online, then I'm going to show you the one flow state trigger that completely changed my life. Alright, let's get straight into it. You can probably agree that procrastination, laziness, avoiding work is much higher in entrepreneurship compared to the 9 to 5 or in school. But why does that happen? Well, the obvious thing is when you're an entrepreneur, you have to work on your own terms, especially when you're online, right? You have all these temptations like going on your phone whenever you want to, distractions. And so developing this ability to get into a flow state is very hard. But thanks to this one flow state trigger that is actually used by the Navy SEALs, it makes it insanely possible to achieve. You know, when you're in the school or you're in 9 to 5, you have a visible consequence that you can actually get if you don't do the work, right? You can get fired, you can get in detention, you can get expelled from school. But when you do entrepreneurship, the results are usually magnified. The actions you put in today are going to be magnified over 2 years. You're going to get the result in 2 years. And so if you miss the work today, it won't really matter that much today, but it's going to matter in a few years. But when it came to entrepreneurship 2 years ago, I would always avoid the work and it would never do the amount of outreach I'd say I would. And so I'd never make money. And this is why entrepreneurship is so hard, because you need to force yourself to do the work, even when you don't want to. And to make this flow state trigger easier to understand, I want you to just imagine a Navy SEAL, right? Navy SEALs are meant to be very high peak performers. They're meant to be the best performing men on earth. You know, they go through hell week, they're constantly testing themselves mentally. Why do you think that is? It's because of the risk factor involved. When they go on the battlefield, they're risking their lives that they could die, they could see their friend die, right? And so their brain is automatically fully engaged in what they're doing. They're not thinking about what their friends are doing, they're trying to survive. That element of risk forces their brain to focus on whatever they're doing, and so they effortlessly perform at their best. And this is what we want to replicate inside our work, because if we can use this flow state trigger called risk, then imagine how much work you get done. That state of alertness you feel, that focus would always be with you, and so you produce work much faster. But first we need to understand what this flow state trigger is, why it's called risk. Well, risk is basically when you put yourself in some kind of mental or physical discomfort, a challenge that you've never experienced before. And what that does is it creates excitement, it creates immersion in the task because you want to achieve it, you want to beat this challenge, and so it automatically uses 100% of your skills that you have. This risk immediately makes you more focused, more alert to what you're doing, and there's a simple step-by-step framework you can actually follow to implement this risk inside your work, inside your business, so you can work faster and you reach flow effortlessly. The first thing I want you to do and identify is get a pen and paper and write down what business tasks feel too threatening or too safe, because each task is going to be a different level of difficulty, right? Maybe outreach for you is going to be very threatening. It was for me in my old business, and maybe making content for you is very safe. And for the tasks that are too safe, what I want you to do is start to set challenges on these tasks. I want you to set a challenge that makes it 4% harder, because basically to actually get into a flow state, you need to make sure the task is 4% harder than your current skill levels. That makes you utilize all your skills basically. So there's a few ways you can actually increase the difficulty. The first thing you can do is set shorter time frames to complete the task you're doing. So I remember one time when I was editing video just like this, right? So usually I set a timer for 1 hour to complete the task and I get it done. But today I decided to test myself. I decided to utilize this risk flow trigger, and basically what I did is I set a 30-minute timer instead of a 1 hour timer. And do you know what happened? I didn't procrastinate. I didn't lose focus. Instead, I actually got the task done in 30 minutes. What would usually take me 1 hour to complete would get done in half an hour. And this is all because of the risk flow trigger, right? You may believe that it's impossible right now, but that is why the risk flow trigger works so well, because it automatically engages you. Now, another way you can do this is basically just set really clear goals on the task, right? Split it into step-by-step formats. So what you can do is as you go along and complete the task, you can tick these off. As what happened to me and what happened to the entrepreneurs I coached is they don't lose focus in the task. They lose focus when they're transitioning between the different steps in the task. So maybe they render a video, they grab the phone. Maybe they face a problem in the task and they grab their phone, right? That's when they lose focus. So when you reverse engineer the task and just put it as a step-by-step format instead, the chances of you losing focus are very low, and so you utilize this risk flow trigger more. And that's only if the task is too safe. If you feel that task is too threatening to you or makes you feel anxious, then what you want to do is reduce the risk because it's too risky. You just kind of find the middle ground with this. So the way you do this is basically just a complete opposite. So you set shorter work sessions, or maybe you set less things to do in these sessions. This will lower the challenge of the task and make it much easier to stay focused and alert during this work session, because I don't want you to be like this Navy SEAL, right, who gets his like leg shot. Obviously he's not going to be focused when he's doing that because he's going to be in a state of panic, he's going to feel anxious. So that's how I utilize the risk flow trigger, and I believe this is one of the most powerful ones, and if you can do this as an entrepreneur, you're going to have no problem focusing. You'll be able to crack out tons of work in a much shorter period of time. And by the way, if you're a young entrepreneur who wants to get into a flow state for 6+ hours in a day, completely blow up your business, get the first link in the Shrimp to Drama free community, where you get a free flow state course and a free coaching call with me. Alright, goodbye.